Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. A good Tuesday evening. Hopefully, you guys have had a great day and a great start to your work week. You know, this week's weather has not been technically dangerous, so that's a nice change of pace this week. We've had some dynamic weather with a nor'easter that's dropped several inches of snow in the interior sections of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. But as far as tornadoes, hail, severe storms, it has calmed down over the last, 24, 48 hours. It was pretty active this weekend. But thankfully, things have calmed down for at least a few days. But in this video, we are going to discuss severe weather. There is a potential for it tomorrow. A pretty heightened potential for a certain area here in the southern plains. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then for my folks here in the southeast, we're going to talk about the frost and freeze concerns. How cold does the temperature get tonight? And for your Wednesday morning, the 20th of April, I want to mention that in case anybody's watching this a little bit later here in a couple days. I am concerned about some temperatures. It's going to dip down well into the 30s. So for my folks here in the southeast, definitely pay attention to this part of the video, which I'm going to mention it first. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the system towards this weekend, where I think there's another blizzard potential for the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming potentially. We'll talk very briefly on that, but I'm going to give that system another 24 hours before we start to latch on to some real details of this. We need to get some model agreement on what's going to happen. So if you guys have not subscribed, definitely consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If you guys got anything I can pray about, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over them. And then more importantly, it gives others an opportunity to do so too. So let's take a look at watches and warnings advisories. So all the pinks you see, that's what we call red flag warnings. Basically, if you have a red flag warning or anywhere around a red flag warning, please do not burn anything, because things are liable to catch on fire much more quicker in these areas where it's been very dry. It is dry currently, and there's just dry air in place. It's just dry. And in certain areas, it's very warm and hot, downright hot in certain areas. So, the blue areas right here, this is what we're going to talk about in the beginning of this video. That is frost advisories. So my folks here in the Carolinas, most of you guys either have a frost advisory or a freeze warning. Freeze warning is the darker blue right in here, going all the way up into southern sections of Pennsylvania, and then covering areas of also West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. We're starting to get later in the year, so they start reissuing frost advisories, freeze warnings, freeze watches, things like that. So let's get a little bit closer for my folks here in the southeast. As you can tell, Virginia, almost all the state's going to get into the 30s. And a good large portion of the state's going to get below freezing. Even in North Carolina, most of the state, unless you're in the far coastal regions where you have a little bit of warmer air, obviously off the ocean, the ocean is warming up this time of the year, kind of warming you guys up on the immediate coast into the 40s maybe. But in the inland areas in the Carolinas, especially, this is what I worry about, especially those country areas, those rural areas outside the city limits, where you don't have a lot of urban heat islands or things like that. You guys always cool about 2 to 5 degrees colder than the areas that are close to town. Most people in the South know all about that. And they don't even have to be in the South. This happens in all areas of the country. It always gets colder once you get out in the country. It really always does. So definitely pay attention. If you live in a town, right, and it says this expected low temperature is, say, 39 degrees, but you live outside the town limits, maybe 3 or 4 miles outside of town limits, kind of where it always gets much darker and it seems to always get much colder. Go on and tack on another 3 to 5 degrees as your potential low temperature, just because the temperature always drops down lower out there. So anyways, I think most of you folks know that, especially people who live out in the country, out in the middle of the nowhere, the boondocks, whatever you want to call it. So there is a concern for this. We'll get a little bit closer look from my folks here in the Carolinas. For example, this is the National Weather Service predicting around 41 degrees here in Columbia. I expect areas outside of Columbia, for example, to get down to the 30s. And then areas, in the upstate of South Carolina, away from the immediate towns, you guys, there could be some isolated areas that dip down to 32 degrees. So if you're in the Carolinas as a whole and you're away from the coastal areas, I really think you need to protect any frost or freeze or cold sensitive plants. I really do, anywhere in the Carolinas. I do. If they're kind of more hardy plants and they're not really bothered by the mid 30s, then certain areas will be okay. But if you have a way to protect your plants and things like that, certainly do if it's a simple task. But hopefully you guys, everybody fares well. I'm not expecting a widespread major freeze or anything like that. So let's talk about the severe weather on what's going on in the southern plains, areas like Oklahoma, far northwest Arkansas, and then areas of southwest Missouri. There's a slight risk up, a marginal risk up, extending all the way into the southern half of Missouri, and then basically the northern sections and northwest sections of Arkansas, you got a marginal risk, and then the slight risk right here. This also includes areas of southeast Kansas. You got a tornado threat, 2% chance and 25 miles on any given point here. A damaging wind threat, 15% risk in the slight risk, and then you got a hail threat. So what I'm really watching here is if the hail threat gets elevated to a hatched risk, meaning you have a 10% risk inside the 15% risk to see 2-inch diameter hail or larger in this region. So this is something I'm watching for. I think some supercells have a chance to get going in this environment. And basically what's going on is you have a trough digging down to this area. It's pretty much a progressive, almost zonal type flow, but you have disturbances kind of riding along this boundary of two air masses where you have a somewhat moist air mass down here and more of a drier winter-like air mass up top. And then you're going to have a disturbance, kicks up a low-level jet, and then you're going to have a risk of severe storms. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's going on as you're waking up tomorrow morning. A lot of morning convection. How quick does this diminish? Does this clear out? I think this will keep the atmosphere somewhat stable in these areas right in here, expecting the severe weather. So you're going to be waking up to a lot of rain and storms in areas. The severe storms, I don't think is going to be much in the way of severe storms in Arkansas and Missouri, but you could have some maybe some somewhat strong storms in these areas, a lot of rainfall as a disturbance moves through, and a lot of convection firing up for your morning time and most of Arkansas, moving into Illinois as you get later in the day. And then areas down here in Arkansas, you're going to have some storms, showers and storms moving into western Tennessee also. But as you get into the afternoon hours, how fast does this atmosphere destabilize? You're going to have the dynamics somewhat in place, but how fast does it destabilize? Well, as you're getting into about 23Z, 23Z, you start to see some big-time storms developing here on the border of Kansas and Missouri. So watch out, maybe around Kansas City. Watch out just outside, maybe just to the south of Kansas City. Some big-time storms can develop. There's going to be a big-time boundary, not a big-time boundary, but a somewhat of a boundary right here where storms are going to develop to the south and then the atmosphere remains stable to the north. This continues, and then you have an eruption of storms possibly here in northeast Oklahoma as you're getting into the later afternoon, really the late evening hours as the sun goes down. You're going to have a potential for storms. Now, I know you're thinking, I don't see much in the way of anything going on here. Well, if you happen to get hit by one of these storms, you could have some large hail. I mean, this is a pretty nasty looking storm that could produce a quick tornado and definitely produce large hail here in far southwest areas of Missouri. And then you see a little bit of a cell popping up around Oklahoma City. Some nasty storms could pop up in this area. Like I said, damaging winds, large hail is the main concern, but you could have an isolated spin up. We're going to have to see if this uptrend as we wake up tomorrow, but I do think some nasty after the sun goes down storms are possible here in southern areas of Missouri, and then areas of eastern Oklahoma, especially northeast Oklahoma, and then even getting into Arkansas, northern areas of Arkansas. Watch out. So it seems like this same kind of region has been under the gun a lot, but hopefully this doesn't really materialize. We don't need any more golf ball, baseball size hail in these areas. Seems like you guys have had some nasty hailstorms in this area over the last several days. But you look at the mixed layer cape in response to these dew points kind of getting decently moist into this area, dew points reaching into the 60s, and you keep this going here, and think of this as storm juice, the juice in the atmosphere that really kind of explode these updrafts for rapid storm development. You have a cape into this area. You got mixed layer cape reaching, 2,000 to 2,500 joules per kilogram in this range. So that is a decent amount of cape in this region. It's not just a decent amount, it's a good bit amount here throughout the afternoon hours in this region. So you're going to have the convective energy around to sustain some severe weather. And you look at the dew points in this region also, and you have a building moist sector into this region for sure into the afternoon, evening hours where dew points reach well into the 60s. In fact, certain areas might flirt with 70, mainly in certain areas, but I think mainly it'll be in the mid to upper 60s as far as dew points, all in this area. So you're going to have a pretty sharp but kind of jetting north moist sector in this area where you're going to have plenty of moist air to deal with to kind of work with these storms as you're getting into tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. So you look at that low-level jet too, which I think will ramp up tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening, right when the dynamics kind of begin to overlap each other as far as the kinematics, the thermodynamics. Basically that storm juice, that moist air, and then the winds aloft and at the surface and then a few thousand feet up in the air starting to mash together somewhat. So, you have a 20 to 30, maybe 40 knots of shear in place right here. The southwesternly low-level jet starts getting kicked up at around 30 to 40, maybe 50 knots in this region. Starts to spin these updrafts, and potential is there for a quick tornado right here in eastern Oklahoma tomorrow evening, and then areas of Arkansas and Missouri. So we need to pay attention to this. This might not be a big deal for a lot of people, but for some people, you never know when it happens to hit your house. There's also still that 15% risk up. This has moved to day 4, obviously, being that day 5 was yesterday when we made the video. So just stay weather aware. This is for Friday. This is a response to a big-time upper trough, mid-level upper trough. It kind of swings into this region, begins to get negatively tilted after the severe weather threat. So we'll talk more about that here in the coming days. Well, really the next 24 hours. But really, I really want to show you guys is look at this. Look at this crazy snowstorm showing up. This is getting into overnight Friday into Saturday morning. A lot of heavy snow showing up for the entire state of Wyoming, right? Even the Rockies down here, the Front Range here in Colorado, but I mean, it really gets intense here in areas of eastern Montana, western North Dakota. You guys get plastered by heavy snow again. I mean, it is looking intense. I mean, look areas into northeastern Wyoming. I mean, even the snow's wrapping back around into Nebraska and then areas of South Dakota. And this looks to be a long duration event where it lasts all the way through Sunday afternoon, evening for some folks. Latest as far as how much snow could fall, this is just a Euro, so it's just a European model. So don't take this as if, don't say, hey, Mitch, you said this amount of snow is going to fall up here. That's not what it means. It's just what one model says, but it gives you the idea of what potentially can happen. These models ended up being right with the blizzard that happened several days ago in this region. But you see right here, 2 feet of snow right here at the border of Montana and North Dakota. I mean, this is intense stuff, guys. It really is. Several inches of snow, well over a foot of snow, feet of snow in areas of Wyoming, eastern Montana, western North Dakota, and then even some heavy snowfall totals showing up in extreme areas of western South Dakota. So this is going to be a big deal. So we'll talk more about that here in the next 24, 36 hours. And we'll keep you guys updated up here. I got a couple viewers up here in this area, so that's always really cool when you have people who tune in for these areas of the country. So thank you for everything. I'm losing my voice for some reason again. Hopefully we're not going to experience that again like a couple weeks ago. But God bless all y'all. Have a safe night, and I'll talk to you guys in the morning.